Sawdust drifted through a shaft of afternoon light as the old clock tower bell rang out over Union Depot. Claire Bennett stood at the edge of the scaffolding, watching Marcus Reed tear a sandwich in half for his daughter, the two of them laughing at some private joke only fathers and 8-year-olds understand. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. "I wish I had a happy family like yours." Marcus looked up, wood shavings clinging to his forearms, and answered before he could stop himself. "My kid needs a mom." Neither of them laughed. The wind carried the silence between them like it was waiting to see what either of them would do with it. Before we go any further, where do you think this story is headed? Drop your guess in the comments, then come back and see if you called it. Union Depot had sat abandoned for 9 years before Bennett Holdings bought it, gutted by fire and forgotten by the city that once loved it. Marcus had spent 5 months trying to bring it back to life. He worked the way his grandfather had, unhurried, precise, hands that knew where to go before his eyes caught up. His daughter, Nora, showed up most afternoons straight from school, backpack still on, settling onto a folded tarp to do homework she rarely finished, always watching him instead. It had been their routine since her mother passed, 3 years now, and it had simply never stopped. Claire watched them from the mezzanine more often than she meant to. She told herself it was a site inspection. It rarely was. There was something about the way Marcus crouched to meet his daughter's eyes, the way he never once reached for his phone mid-sentence, that undid something in Claire she didn't have a name for. She had a glass office downtown with her name etched on the door, and she'd eaten dinner alone at her desk 4 nights that week. Her father's old business partner, Nathaniel Cole, found her there one afternoon, studying the platform like a man reading a ledger he didn't like the sum of. "Preston Kane is flying in Thursday," he said without preamble. "His family wants this merger settled before the shareholder vote." "I haven't agreed to anything, Nathaniel." "Your father would have." She didn't answer, because he was usually right about her father, and being right about her father was the thing Cole weaponized best. She found herself near Marcus's workbench without entirely deciding to. "You're staring at my joinery, or you're staring at me," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hard to tell which insults me more." It was the first time she'd laughed all week. They talked for 10 minutes about nothing, the grain of the reclaimed oak, whether the old ticket window should stay exposed brick. Somewhere in those 10 minutes, Claire forgot she ran a company worth crossing oceans for. She was just a woman talking to a man who built things and wanted nothing from her. The trouble started with a beam. Engineers flagged a load calculation on the west wing that didn't reconcile with decades-old blueprints, and after 2 days of arguing, they suggested delaying the renovation a month to fly in a specialist. Marcus found the blueprints abandoned on the site table that evening, everyone gone home frustrated. He picked up a pencil, assuming the trailer was empty. Claire, coming back for her charger, stopped in the doorway and watched him solve in 4 minutes what 3 engineers hadn't solved in 2 days, small, precise corrections, accounting for a settling pattern nobody else had noticed. "You've done this before," she said. He set the pencil down like he'd been caught at something. "A long time ago." That night, alone at her desk, she searched his name. It took 11 minutes to find what she wasn't looking for: a structural patent filed under Marcus J. Reed, a seismic dampening system still cited in engineering journals, a firm bio listing him as co-founder and chief structural engineer of one of the most respected firms on the East Coast. He hadn't mentioned it once. She didn't confront him. The next morning she brought 2 coffees and said, "Stay for dinner tonight." The whole crew, my treat. He studied her a second too long, like he understood she was offering him something that had nothing to do with catering. "Nora will hold you to a proper dinner. Not sandwiches. I can manage a proper dinner." It was the first time either of them smiled like they meant it all the way through. That evening, the half-restored waiting hall was dressed as much as a construction site could manage: long tables, string lights looped between iron columns. Nora sat between her father and Claire without being asked, peppering her with questions no adult would dare ask. "Do you have kids?" No. Do you want some? Marcus said, Nora, but Claire only shook her head, unbothered. I used to think I didn't have time for that. Now I'm not so sure. Later, on the loading dock steps, night settling cool over the river, Claire said, the board wants me to marry a man I've met twice. Marcus didn't flinch. That sounds like a business decision wearing a wedding dress. That's exactly what it is. Then it's not really a marriage. She realized she trusted him more after 10 minutes of honesty than she trusted Preston after 2 dinners of practice charm. Cole moved faster than she expected. He arranged for Preston to tour the site personally, timed to coincide with Marcus's crew on the mezzanine. Preston looked past Marcus entirely when introduced, addressing Cole instead. Good with your hands, then, he said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. Marcus set down his level and looked him in the eye. Good with my hands, my head, and my daughter's homework. Not sure which of those you're asking about. Claire stepped in beside him. Marcus's craftsmanship is the reason this project is 3 weeks ahead of schedule. I'd think that's worth more than a handshake. Something in the air shifted, the quiet, unmistakable fact that Claire Bennett had chosen a side, in public, in front of witnesses who would remember. Cole didn't confront her that day. Instead, he called an old contact at Marcus's former firm, then cornered a security guard named Diaz, who'd served alongside Marcus years earlier, offering money for information. Diaz didn't take the offer. 2 days later, he brought Claire a folder instead. There's something you should see. About Marcus. About a building in Norfolk, 9 years ago. The folder held an incident report from a partial structural failure at a public housing complex, and buried inside it, Marcus's name as the engineer who caught the fault before full collapse, who evacuated 400 residents on his own authority hours before officials arrived, who was quietly written out of the firm's official account so the partners above him could take the credit. He never talked about it, Diaz said. Not once. He walked away from the firm about a year later, right around when his wife got sick. I think the two things got tangled together for him. Claire found Marcus on the platform that evening, his daughter asleep nearby. Norfolk, she said. 9 years ago. He went still. I saved 400 people, and the company I helped build erased me so it wouldn't look bad in the papers. Nobody asked if I was all right. They asked if I'd sign quietly and go home. I won't forget it, she said. Something in his face, guarded since the day she'd met him, simply let go. Why are you telling me this instead of running the other way, he asked. Because you didn't ask me to believe you. You just told me the truth and let me decide what to do with it. Cole struck 2 days later, in a room full of people, the way he always preferred. He projected Marcus's old records at an emergency board session, framed as a liability the board hadn't vetted. A man with a buried history working unsupervised around our CEO and her child. Marcus stood in the doorway, uninvited but unwilling to let his name be spoken in a room he wasn't allowed to answer in. I wasn't distanced. I was erased. There's a difference. Ask Nathaniel what happened to the junior engineers who signed off on that complex under his old firm's letterhead. The room went quiet. An older board member who'd served with Claire's father for decades cleared her throat. I remember that Norfolk complex. My sister lived 3 buildings over. I remember there being some engineer nobody could get a straight answer about afterward. She looked at Cole without warmth. Richard, sit down. Cole gathered his folder, movement suddenly stiff, and muttered something about reconvening once cooler heads prevailed. Nobody was listening to him anymore. The vote was scheduled for the next morning. Claire spent the night compiling every piece of the record, cross-referenced against Marcus's corrected load calculation, until the story told itself without her needing to raise her voice. Standing before the board, she didn't mention marriage, didn't mention Preston. The truth is, this project is ahead of schedule and structurally sound because of the man Nathaniel is trying to discredit. 9 years ago, that same man saved 400 lives and got written out of the story for it. My father built this company on craftsmanship, not connections bought at a wedding. I intend to keep it that way, with or without this board's blessing. The vote wasn't close. Cole resigned before the session adjourned, 2 sentences, no apology. Claire didn't go back to her office afterward. She went straight to Union Depot, found Marcus exactly where she knew she would, and said nothing at all before crossing the platform to stand beside him. "You didn't have to come here first," he said. "I wanted to." The weeks after moved quieter than any before them. Preston's family found another firm to court within the month, and nobody at Bennett Holdings mourned the contract for even a day. Claire started staying past closing hour for inspections that grew shorter each time. Marcus started keeping 2 cups of coffee warm instead of 1. Nora stopped being surprised to find Claire there and started simply assuming she would be. On the evening the last of the scaffolding finally came down, Marcus and Claire climbed to the rooftop terrace together, the city spread gold beneath them. "What happens after this?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. She reached over instead and let her hand rest against his on the railing. Neither of them pulled away. "I used to think I wanted my old life back," Marcus said finally. "Standing in that boardroom, saying it out loud, I didn't feel like I'd gotten something back. I felt like I'd finally set something down." "What do you feel now?" she asked. He looked at her, not the skyline. "Like maybe I'm not finished building things after all. Just different things than I thought." At the grand reopening 3 months later, string lights had been replaced with real fixtures, the old ticket windows kept exposed just as Marcus first suggested. Nora wove through the crowd in a dress she'd picked herself, introducing Claire to anyone who'd stand still long enough to listen. "This is my dad's friend," she said each time, and then, quieter, like a secret she was proud to keep, "she's the best one." Near the old ticket windows, as the crowd thinned, Marcus turned the cup in his hands. "You said something to me once. The first day. You said you wished you had a family like mine. I remember. And you told me your kid needs a mom." I wasn't joking. Not entirely. I just didn't expect an answer. Claire looked past him, at Nora laughing near the door, at the building they'd rebuilt from the ground up, at the man in front of her who had never once asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. "You have one now," she said. "If you'll have her." He didn't answer with words. He reached for her hand, certain this time, and neither of them looked toward the door, or the crowd, or anything at all beyond each other, and the building standing quiet and whole around them. If this story moved you, the full journey is only just beginning. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next.